Chapter 9. The Parenting Tutorial. I picked my way through the rubble of the starter village, stepping over broken timbers and scattered stone, and followed the old road out into the meadows beyond. The path was barely there, just a worn dip in the grass where travelers had walked before me, but it was heading somewhere, and that was enough. The meadows gave way to trees as the road curved into a stretch of woodland. After the claustrophobic gloom of the mines, this was a breath of fresh air. The trees were a vibrant, healthy green. Sunlight dappled through the canopy, painting golden spots on the mossy path. Birds chirped, butterflies fluttered. I was walking through a classic fantasy painting, all sunshine, bird song, and the unsettling feeling that something was about to ruin it. A deep, disembodied voice spoke in my ear, the game narrator apparently. Leaving safe zone, ruins of Oakhaven. Entering the Rabbit Meadows, starter zone. I stopped and looked up, instinctively searching for the source of the voice. There was nothing there, of course, just sky and leaves. "Thanks for the heads up, disembodied game narrator," I said to the empty air. "Are you going to do this every time I cross a boundary?" Silence. I waited. Nothing. "Right, guess that's a yes," I muttered, shrugging my stone shoulders. I kept walking, my feet crunching into the dirt. The forest settled around me. Birds sang, leaves rustled in the breeze. It was peaceful, calm, the kind of quiet that made you forget you were in a game where things could kill you. Then something rustled in the undergrowth ahead. I stopped, my stone body ground to a halt. I've watched enough nature documentaries to know that sound means trouble. I raised my fists, granite knuckles ready. "All right," I whispered, scanning the bushes. "First encounter. Let's see what we've got. Wolf? Goblin? Bandit?" The bushes parted, leaves scattered. Something small and fast burst through the undergrowth and landed in the middle of the path. It was fluffy, soft white fur, big round eyes, a tiny tail bobbed behind it, and a pink nose twitched with aggressive cuteness. One floppy ear hung sideways, giving the whole creature an expression of permanent confusion. An information nameplate appeared above the rabbit's head. Pesky Rabbit, Level 1. A rabbit. My first enemy was a tiny, fluffy rabbit. I lowered my fists and stared at the adorable little thing. "You've got to be kidding me." I couldn't help myself. I crouched down, my stone knees grinding like old machinery, and reached out a massive granite finger toward the little fuzzball. "Who's a cute little rabbit?" I cooed. "Aren't you just the fluffiest little—" The nameplate snapped from neutral white to a violent, throbbing red. It was like a scene out of a Monty Python script. The unholy bunny launched itself like a rocket at my shin, all teeth and fur, and absolutely no mercy. Chomp! Its teeth clamped down on my granite ankle. The impact was surprisingly solid for something so small. Then, a glowing number materialized in the air above where it had bitten me. 0. I blinked at the floating 0. What was that? Some kind of damage indicator? I'd seen numbers in games before, but this was different. It hung in the air like a physical thing, pulsing faintly before starting to fade. And then something else appeared. A small window in the corner of my vision, a combat log, scrolling with text like a live feed of the fight. Combat log. Pesky Rabbit hits you for 2 physical damage. Racial passive, stone skin, reduces damage by 75%. Defense stat negates remaining damage. Final damage, 0. I stared at the combat log, then at the 0 damage. So this was how the game worked. Numbers floated up when something got hit. A log tracked every action. 2 damage, reduced by 75%. Defense absorbed the rest. 0 damage. I wasn't hurt, not even a little. I looked down at my stone body, broad, solid, built like a walking fortress. Apparently, I was a tank. The rabbit had just hit me with everything it had, and I'd felt nothing, like a pebble bouncing off a mountain. I looked down. The rabbit was still gnawing furiously at my granite ankle. "You didn't even do any damage," I said, shaking my head. "0, nothing." The rabbit kept chewing. "All right," I sighed. "My turn." I raised my granite fist. I won my shoulders, feeling the satisfying grind of granite against granite. 7 feet of pure, unadulterated mountain, and that fluffy little menace which weighed approximately 3 carats was about to learn why you don't pick fights with a walking landslide. I wound up like I was trying to punch a hole through reality itself, and brought my fist down with everything I had. Thwomp! The impact rattled the meadow. I put my whole body into that punch. Hips, shoulders, momentum. The impact echoed across the grassy meadow. By all laws of physics, the creature should have been paste, a wet smear on the turf, a fluffy cautionary tale for the local woodland creatures. I slowly pulled my fist back. The rabbit sat there, completely unharmed. It lacked so much as a ruffled patch of fur. It merely tilted its head and blinked up at me, looking as though I had just delivered a mildly confusing joke about accounting. Not injured, not even dazed, not even mildly inconvenienced. I stared at the rabbit. The rabbit stared back. We were both intensely confused. I pulled up the system interface to check the combat log. Somewhere in the distance, a bird laughed. Probably.
What? I read it again, then a third time, because apparently my brain needed multiple attempts to process the sheer audacity of what I was seeing. I'd just thrown a punch that could have caved in a fortress wall. My arm was literally 1,000 pounds of compressed stone, and this rabbit, this tiny, twitchy-nosed, aggressively adorable ball of fluff, had absorbed it like I'd patted it on the head and called it a good boy. The rabbit chose that moment to bite my ankle. 0. I stopped on it. 0. It bit me again. 0. I backhanded it. 0. Haymaker. 0. Another stomp. 0. For the next 30 seconds, I engaged in what historians would later describe as the least productive battle in recorded history. I swung, I kicked, I stomped, I even tried sitting on it. The rabbit responded by bouncing around my feet like an aggressive cotton ball and occasionally nibbling on my ankles. Neither of us accomplished anything. To an outside observer, the scene must have looked ridiculous. A 7-foot granite golem built like a fortress wall, flailing wildly in the middle of a peaceful meadow. A tiny rabbit hopped around his feet. Neither combatant was winning, neither combatant was losing, neither combatant appeared capable of affecting reality in any meaningful way. Eventually, I lowered my fists. The rabbit stopped hopping. We regarded each other with the exhausted resignation of 2 office workers trapped in the same meeting. "Timeout," I said. The rabbit twitched an ear, but apparently did not believe in timeouts. It tried to bite my toe. I exhaled and accepted the terrible truth. My first encounter, and I had already met my match. I couldn't hurt the rabbit, and it couldn't hurt me. An eternal loop of mediocrity. But then I remembered the moment I'd materialized in this world. The core card had appeared in front of me, 3 options hovering in the air, and I'd chosen the summoner's card, the one that let me summon a companion, a friend, something that could actually fight. All I needed was 10 stones, and right now, scattered around this stupidly beautiful meadow, there were rocks everywhere. "Fine," I said, glaring down at the rabbit attached to my ankle. "I'm ignoring you." The rabbit responded by biting harder. I started walking. The fluffy little psychopath followed. Every few steps, chomp, 0 damage. I ignored it with the determination of a man refusing to acknowledge an annoying pop-up ad. Instead, I scanned the meadow, squinting like a man who dropped his keys in tall grass. Scattered across the ground like cosmic breadcrumbs, objects with faint white outlines glowing around them, like someone had taken a highlighter to the world and said, "This stuff? Yours." Apparently, my grand adventure had begun with foraging. A clump of green leaves near a fallen log, a cluster of blue mushrooms that looked suspiciously psychedelic, a bundle of dry twigs that seemed profoundly unimpressive. The game was doing that thing games do, marking the difference between random scenery and actual usable materials, because apparently in this world you couldn't just pick up any old rock. No, it had to be a glowing rock. Priorities. I crouched and touched a bunch of leaves with the glowing outlines. They dissolved into sparkles and vanished into my chest like I'd inhaled a firefly. System log. Collected, minor medicinal herb, +1 XP. I blinked. Huh. Touch glowing thing, it disappears, and I get loot. That's simple. No harvesting animation, no digging, no inventory management nightmare. Just touch the shiny thing and let the universe sort it out. I moved methodically across the grass, touching each glowing item like a kid in a candy store with zero impulse control. Each one dissolved the same way. Collected mushroom, plus 1 XP. Collected twig, plus 1 XP. Collected silver moss, plus 1 XP. I pulled up my inventory menu. A simple grid materialized in front of me, and this time it actually had stuff in it. Tiny icons filled several slots: herbs, mushrooms, twigs, moss, all neatly organized as if someone had hired an obsessive librarian to manage my pockets. So that's where everything went. Into my chest, my inventory chest. I patted my stone torso. I'm a walking storage unit. Fantastic! Then I had an idea. I focused on the herb icon in the grid. Pop! The herb popped into existence in my hand like a magician's finale. 1 second, it was a picture on a screen. The next, it was real, leaves and all, resting in my palm like it had always been there. Ooh! I turned it over, examining the veins on the leaves. Same herb, same texture, same faint earthy smell. The game just reached into my soul, grabbed the item, and handed it to me like a vending machine with existential implications. Okay, I admitted, that's actually kinda cool. I pushed it back into my inventory mentally. It dissolved again, returning to its little square like a well-trained pet. I pulled it out, pushed it back, pulled it out. Repeated this approximately 12 times in rapid succession because apparently my brain had the attention span of a goldfish with ADHD. "You're a wizard, Harry," I said to myself, grinning. Jump. The rabbit headbutted my shin hard enough to interrupt my celebration. I looked down, the rabbit looked up. Its expression somehow conveyed deep disappointment. "Don't judge me." The rabbit bit my ankle. 0 damage.
Further down the road, I spotted a small chunk of gray stone half buried near a broken cobblestone. It had the same faint white outline as everything else I'd collected. That meant it wasn't just rubble. It was loot. A resource, the exact thing I needed for my summons. I pried it loose. System log. Collected, rock, plus 1 XP. Finally! 1 down, 9 to go. 10 minutes of scavenging later, and roughly 300 bites to my ankle from the death bunny, I had the 10 stones. "All right, Rabbit," I said, looking down at the creature still attached to my shin. "Let's see how you feel about my new friend." The summon icon in the corner of my vision had been a dull, grayed-out square since I started in this world. Locked, unusable, mocking me. But now, with 10 stones in my inventory, it pulsed with warm golden light. The skill was ready. I reached up and swiped my hand through the holographic icon, the same way you'd tap a button on a screen. The gesture triggered the skill. The ground beside me rumbled. Dirt churned. A shape rose from the earth. Broad shoulders, stumpy legs, a glowing amber core burning in its chest. A nameplate appeared over the new construct in front of me. Construct, Level 1, Companion, Assign Name. He was about 2.5 feet tall, knee-high to me, blocky. He looked like someone had carved a child's drawing of a person out of gravel and brought it to life. The construct blinked. His amber eyes took in the world for the first time, the sky, the trees, the grass beneath his feet. Then his gaze locked onto a rock at his feet. With the speed and single-minded focus of a toddler spotting floor candy, he snatched the rock and shoved it toward his mouth. "No!" I yelled, my dad reflexes kicking in before I could stop them. "Spit it out! That's not food!" The little rock boy froze. He looked up at me with the wide-eyed innocence of a puppy caught stealing from the bin. Slowly, reluctantly, his stone jaw creaked open. Plop! The rock tumbled onto the grass. I sighed. 3 seconds in, and I'm already the parent who has to say, "Don't eat that." This is exactly how it was with Kurt, except Kurt didn't try to eat rocks, usually. The construct's nameplate still read, "Unassigned." He stared at me with those empty amber eyes, waiting for something he probably didn't understand. "You need a name," I said. He tilted his head. "Nothing." "Rubble?" I muttered. "Too obvious. You're literally made of rubble. It's like naming a cat, Cat." He blinked. Dwayne? I chuckled. Too meta. Also, you're not nearly that muscly. He just stood there, blocky and patient. I looked at his face. That stupid, lovable, completely empty face. He was dumb as a box of rocks. Actually, he was a box of rocks. But there was something endearing about him. Like a puppy with no brain and too much enthusiasm. Let's keep it simple, I said. I entered the name. His nameplate flickered once, then changed. Rocco. Level 1. Rocco. Short, solid, stupid, perfect. The rabbit, apparently offended that I'd stopped paying attention, went in for another chomp. Rocco ignored the rabbit completely. His rocky gaze stayed fixed on me, waiting for a command. I pointed at the rabbit, channeling my inner Tony Montana. Say hello to my little friend. Rocco turned his head slowly. His gaze followed to where I was pointing to the rabbit. He looked at his hands and clenched them into fists. Then, with the speed of a falling glacier, he brought his fists down. Smash! Dust exploded outward. The ground cracked. I waited for the dust to settle, expecting to see a pancaked rabbit under Rocco's fists. The rabbit wasn't there. It had hopped sideways at the last second and was now attached to Rocco's ankle, teeth sinking into stone.
Pesky rabbit hits Rocco for 1 damage. A red health bar shimmered into existence above Rocco's head, dropping from full to 14-15. Rocco recoiled, letting out a sound like grinding stones. He looked up at me with an expression that was impossible to read on his blocky face, but somehow I knew exactly what he was thinking. "Why did the cute bunny bite me, Dad?" "Hit it back," I shouted. Rocco swung again. Whoosh! The rabbit had already moved. It darted around his stumpy legs, nipping at his heels like a furry little shark, and Rocco's punch sailed through empty air. This was going badly. Then a voice cut through from behind us. "Wait for the kinetic load, you imbecile." The voice was sharp, educated, and absolutely dripping with condescension. It came from somewhere behind me, up on the hill. I spun around to see a small cemetery sat atop a nearby rise. Gravestones leaned at odd angles along the slope, and among them floated a ghost waist-deep in a crooked marble headstone, as though he'd simply phased halfway through it and never bothered to leave. He was translucent, tinted blue, dressed like a Victorian accountant who'd lost a fight with a wardrobe. Spectacles perched on his nose, a waistcoat hung unevenly from his frame. In one hand, he brandished a wooden ruler like a weapon. "What?" I yelled back. "The kinetic load. His timing is atrocious. He's telegraphing the strike like a drunk semaphore operator." "I don't know what that means," I yelled. "Hit the rabbit when it's in the air. Gravity is a constant. The rabbit is not." I looked at Rocco. "You heard the man. Wait for the hop." Rocco paused. His blocky head tilted toward the rabbit. He waited. The rabbit stopped running. It crouched low, muscles coiling. "Wait for it," the ghost said from behind us. The rabbit launched itself into the air. "Now!" the ghost bellowed. Rocco swung. His stone fist carved through the air like a wrecking ball. Crunch! Rocco hits Pesky Rabbit for 4 damage. "Congratulations! You have defeated Pesky Rabbit. Level 1, plus 10 XP. "Yes, attaboy, Rocco." 2 blue notifications popped up immediately. "Level up. You are now level 2. Level 2 already. At this rate, I'd be unstoppable by next Tuesday, probably. Curious, I glanced at Rocco. The nameplate floating above his head hadn't changed. Rocco, level 1 companion. Huh. I go up, you stay the same. That's rough, buddy. Remind me never to hire your union representative. I found the Menus tab hovering in the corner of my vision and waved a hand toward it. The animation triggered, and a skill card table unfolded in front of me like a magician's trick. It was a smooth, dark wooden table, about the size of a coffee table, with a pedestal at the far end. A single card slot sat at its center, and my core card rested inside it like the crown jewel of a display case. My character sheet floated beside the slot, crisp and glowing, and behind the card, a miniature hologram of Rocco stood on a small pedestal, his own stats hovering beside him. Character sheet. Name, BigRock. Class, Geomancer Artificer. Level 2. HP 27 plus 3. Attributes: Constitution 9 plus 1, Wisdom 8 plus 1, Strength 2, Agility 1, Intelligence 2. Available free stat points 1. Okay, I muttered. Constitution and Wisdom both got a bump, plus 1 free point I can add to any stat. I glanced over at the real Rocco. He was clapping his stone hands together trying to catch a moth with all the coordination of a sleepy toddler. A part of me thought I should try to use the stat point to help him, as he could use more wisdom. But let's be real, I was the brains of this operation. I wanted him to hit harder. I glanced at the hologram next to Rocco's miniature form.
Companion Character Sheet. Name, Rocco, plus. Class, Summoned Companion. Level 1, plus. HP, 12. Attributes, Constitution, 4. Wisdom, 4. Strength, 1. Agility, 1. Intelligence, 1. Exactly half. Every single stat was exactly half of what mine used to be before I leveled up. So that was the rule. Rocco scaled directly off me, rounded down. Useful to know. It also meant if I got stronger, he'd get stronger. Eventually, hopefully. A throat cleared behind me, loud, theatrical, and dripping with impatience. I ignored it. I was in the middle of doing what every gamer loved, staring at numbers, watching them go up, and planning my next move. Small, but meaningful. Progress. I allocated my free stat point into strength. My strength went from 2 to 3. That was good. That meant Rocco would hit harder too, once I figured out why his stats hadn't updated with mine. I waited for something to happen. A glow, a surge of power, a stat bump on Rocco's hologram. Nothing. The same numbers on Rocco's stat sheet, floating there, unmoved. Well, I said, that was anticlimactic. My frown deepened. Had I done something wrong? Was there a step I'd missed? That's when I noticed it. A small pulsing plus symbol had appeared beside Rocco's name and level on the hologram display. I focused on it. A gray tooltip flickered into existence. System. Available stat allocation detected. Note, unapplied stat increases require resummoning the companion to take effect. I read it twice, then a third time. Resummoning, I said slowly. I closed the card table. It folded up and tucked itself back into the corner of my vision and looked at Rocco. He was crouched in the grass now, trying to eat a dandelion. So to make him stronger, I had to summon him again, which meant this version had to be dismissed first. I pulled up the menu tab in the corner of my vision and scrolled through every option I could find. Settings, system, status, inventory, nothing. No dismiss companion button, no send home command, just the summon icon grayed out because Rocco was already here. I stared at the grayed out icon, then at Rocco, then back at the menu. Was I supposed to kill him? I looked at Rocco. He looked back at me, dandelion drooping from his stone mouth, completely oblivious, utterly trusting. Before I could finish weighing the logistics, how heavy a rock, movement caught my eye. The rabbit's body had begun to dissolve, breaking apart into pale wisps of smoke that curled upward and faded into nothing. A single sparkling crystal shard materialized above the grass, hovering like a tiny star. Rocco's head snapped toward it. His glowing amber eyes locked onto the floating shard, his stone jaw working silently, side to side, like a toddler who'd just spotted a cookie on a high shelf. He took one mesmerized step forward. Then the shard blinked out of existence. Rocco froze. He stared at the empty patch of grass for several long seconds. Then he let out a small, disappointed grinding sound. A new notification appeared. System. Loot automatically collected. Items within range have been added to your inventory. Curious, I opened my inventory. 1 times rabbit pelt, low quality. 1 times copper coin. I stared at the coin. 1 copper? Where was the rabbit hiding that? It clearly didn't have pockets. I glanced at Rocco again.
He'd gone back to eating his dandelion, utterly content and not about to debate the absurdity of a rabbit carrying currency. The throat cleared behind me again, louder this time. The ghost was still floating there, watching us from his crooked tombstone like a nosy neighbor judging my hedges. "Hey," I called out, waving a heavy hand, "thanks for the tip with the rabbit." I walked up the slope, Rocco trundling happily behind me. As we got closer, the old man didn't get any more solid. Sunlight passed through his coat, casting a bluish tint on the grass behind him, and he wasn't standing on the ground. He was floating waist-deep inside a crooked marble tombstone, bisected right through the belt buckle. "Whoa," I breathed. "You're a ghost." I leaned in, unable to resist, waving a hand through his ethereal body. He recoiled, his spectral face twisting with indignation.
"Do not touch the deceased. I may be bound to this stone, but I can still haunt you."
I straightened up, meeting his glowing eyes with a grin. "I ain't no afraid no ghost," I said. The ghost stared at me blankly.
"I beg your pardon? Was that a double negative? Are you implying you are afraid?"
"It's a movie line," I sighed. "Tough crowd." The ghost adjusted his spectacles.
"Adequate. Barely. I dare say you have the structural integrity of a fortress, but the combat prowess of a decorative planter."
"Did you just call me a pot plant?" I asked.
"I called you a decorative planter,"
the ghost corrected.
"There is a distinction. One implies utility, you imbecile."
"Well, this decorative planter just punched a rabbit into data." "Well, we did."
"The child punched the rabbit,"
the ghost scoffed.
"You stood there shouting instructions like a football coach with a mouthful of gravel. It was embarrassing to watch."
I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. The ghost was right. "I'm BigRock," I said. "This is Rocco."
"Royal Surveyor Fizzlewick Charles Montgomery,"
the ghost announced with a stiff bow.
"And I am dreadfully behind schedule. The ley line grid is a shambles. Absolute dog's breakfast."
He rapped his ruler against the marble slab tombstone he was protruding from.
"Unfortunately, I am also deceased, which means I am bound to this infernal monument, solid, immovable, and an unrelenting nuisance."
He floated a few inches upward, only to snap back to the tombstone as if attached by an invisible leash.
"I can drift about a little, but I cannot stray far from it. Occupational hazard of being dead."
He sighed dramatically.
"So, look alive, old chap. Hoist me up, and let's trot."
I stared at him, then at the tombstone, then back at him. "You want me to carry your gravestone around?"
"Conveyance, transport, locomotion. I require a beast of burden, and you fit the description marvelously. Thank you in advance."
Rocco walked up and kicked the tombstone.
Thud. Roots tore. The slab tilted violently. Fizzlewick shrieked. Rocco looked up at me, vibrating with silent, mischievous pride. Fizzlewick, however, was dangling at a 45-degree angle, clutching his spectral lapels to keep from sliding off a surface he wasn't technically touching.
"Oh, stop looking so pleased with yourself, you juvenile pile of gravel. And you, control your beast."
"Look, Mr. Fizzle," I said, crossing my heavy arms, "we're pretty busy. We've got a whole world to explore, and I don't really have time to play landscape gardener for a dead guy."
"Busy."
Fizzlewick sputtered, his face turning an indignantly bright shade of blue.
"It's Fizzlewick or Sir, and you, sir, are wandering around a pasture punching livestock. I am trying to prevent the metaphysical collapse of reality. I am fighting for the good of all sentient creatures, you selfish boulder."
"Metaphysical what now?" I tried to follow along. Fizzlewick let out a long, suffering sigh. He pinched the bridge of his spectral nose, then looked at me with slow, exaggerated patience, like he was explaining corporate law to a golden retriever.
"Right. Let us try small words. The world has veins, magic veins. We call them ley lines. Can you say ley lines?" I know what a... Hush. Now, these veins are getting sick. There is a darkness, a naughty, nasty sludge clogging the pipes. If we do not scrub the pipes, the magic stops flowing. If the magic stops flowing, the grid collapses. And if the grid collapses...
He trailed off, waving a hand for me to finish. Everything explodes, I guessed?
Well, no.
Fizzlewick said with a dismissive wave of his ruler.
But the paperwork will be atrocious.
He shuddered dramatically, clutching his spectral lapels as if the very thought gave him chills.
And also the darkness will likely consume all light and hope, etc., etc. The point is, I need to fix the spires to cleanse the grid, but I am anchored to this rock. I am a cartographer, sir, not an adventurer. I make the maps. I do not fight monsters.
You're a map maker? I perked up.
I am the royal surveyor.
Fizzlewick corrected haughtily.
I possess the administrator access keys for the entire local topography.
He paused, letting that sink in. He looked at my confused face, then at the endless fog-covered forest behind me.
I can unlock your map. Fog of war, gone. Waypoints, visible. I can show you the world, shining, shimmering, and splendid, but only if you carry me to the spires and solve the problem with the darkness.
A blue system window bloomed into existence between us. New quest, the Royal Survey, Chain Quest. Objective, escort Fizzlewick to the 3 ley-line spires. Reward, card, map. I looked at Rocco. I looked at the endless woods. I looked back at the pompous ghost. I need a map, I admitted, and you need legs.
Precisely. A symbiosis of brain and brawn. Mostly brain in my case.
Fine. I stepped forward and wrapped my massive stone arms around the base of the tilted marble slab.
Wait, what are you...
cried Fizzlewick before... crunch. I heaved, roots snapped, earth sprayed everywhere. With a groan of grinding stone, I ripped the entire tombstone free from the hill. I looped the torn roots over my shoulders like makeshift straps, settling the slab against my back. Fizzlewick hovered over one shoulder like a spectral parrot. Fizzlewick blinked, looked down at the grass, then out at the horizon. His face lit up with pure bureaucratic joy.
Elevation!
He whipped out his ghostly ruler and pointed it toward the tree line like a cavalry officer's saber.
Excellent work, intern. We are back on schedule. Now, mush, to the jackalope mound. We have a survey to complete.
I am not a horse, I grumbled, shifting the weight of the granite slab.
Not with that attitude, you're not.
I sighed and started walking, following his spectral ruler like a disgruntled Uber driver. But as we walked, my eyes drifted to Rocco, trundling along beside me, occasionally stopping to sniff at interesting rocks, completely unaware that somewhere down the line I was going to have to figure out how to re-summon him. I shoved the thought aside, one existential crisis at a time. For now, I had a quest to complete, a map to unlock, foes to vanquish, and a 1-ton hitchhiker to boss me around while I did all of it.